Alright, hello. So, welcome back. Today, I'm going to continue on attraction. And as I mentioned previously, what I'll continue on is on emotion. So, like what I intended previously was emotion to be a subset of the first video, which is why I struggle to comprehend how long this video actually would be. This video could potentially be very short, maybe within 15 minutes, or it could have the same length of 30 minutes, or worst case scenario, it might be even more, right? And the reason why is because in order for me to touch upon the emotions when it comes down to attraction, I also have to share a little bit more knowledge in terms of how emotion actually works, right? And emotion being a subset of feelings. The topic that I see, if I were to share comprehensively what exactly is feelings in contrast of what exactly is thinking, then I think that video is going to be quite long in itself. But ideally, I do not want to share all the intricacies of what feeling actually is, because it defeats the purpose. There are going to be some portions of feelings that you don't really need to understand to use in a attraction setting. So the only thing that I'll share is things that I feel like it's more applicable in the situation when you're utilizing it for attraction, right? So in any case, let's just jump straight into the explanation to a certain extent. Okay, so when it comes down to emotion, okay, and if you were to ask me where should I actually begin sharing in terms of emotion when it comes down to attraction, I will always start with the how human beings prioritize things, or to a certain extent, why do we pay attention to things in general. So the idea is, I have shared this concept before, but this is the idea of the reptilian brain. And I think that I first introduced this concept when I did the video of mirroring. And the idea is that for human being, we have the reptilian brain that is first developed, then followed by the animal brain, which encompasses emotions in general. And then we have our rational brain. And then this is maybe our human brain. Then it deals with logic, right? But again, this is just for your information. The only thing that you need to know about the reptilian brain, again, is that the reptilian brain is only concerned of three things. One is sustenance. Sustenance should be the correct spelling, I hope. And two is procreation. And three is survival. Then, of course, this is survival. Survival. And you can say that, yeah, these are just complex and neutral way to say things without triggering certain sort of impulses or what's that thing? Stimulation to you, right? And even the word stimulation, you can say that to a certain extent would bring certain emotion or feelings up. But the idea is that the emotional equivalence of all these three words, if we are not talking in terms of logic and neutrality, is sustenance would be something such as hunger, and lust to a certain extent, because it's about devouring and consuming and taking over dominance, etc. Procreation, it's sex. And you can say that this procreation tends to extend towards creating a family, the fantasy of creating offsprings, right? And survival is just the idea of death. And you can say that for a human animal or any sort of emotional animal in general, and you can say that, well, to a certain extent, this will work on crocodile, right? Because the idea is the reptilian brain. The idea is that if somebody or something does not trigger any of these three things, the person or the item is deemed to be a non-event. Which means to say that I do not need to pay attention to you. And if you think about it logically, it's like, it makes sense, right? If it doesn't threaten me, it doesn't threaten my survival, I do not see that I can eat it in any sort of way, and I don't intend to have sex with it, then the idea is that, well, what is the value or the emotional or attention value to this particular item, right? So this is why I usually describe it to be, if you can't trigger any sort of emotion in another person, then you might as well be a chair. because that's how the person is going to see you, right? You're a non-event, right? The person is not going to eat you. The person doesn't see that there's a desire to eat you, there is no desire to have sex with you, and then you doesn't threaten the person in any way, right? And of course, you can say that for complex animals such as human beings, we tend to go beyond just on the basis of purely literally what these three things actually mean. So what I mean is that survival is not just dealing in terms of death. For social animals, survival actually translate and extends towards rejection. Why? Because for social animals, being rejected and ostracized by the tribe is equivalent to death. So just like the idea of if a wild wildebeest is being abandoned by the tribe in the savannah, then you can say that, well, the lion is going to have a very easy time killing off that sole wildebeest instead of having the protection from the tribe. So rejection, which is why for human beings, by nature, we have such an inherent fear of rejection. And that's why most people, and myself included, okay, I'm not going to exclude myself in that, is going to fear rejection to a certain extent. We are going to struggle if, let's say, somebody will say that, well, I'm going to go up to this person and then just try to convince them of something, try to talk to them, because what if they just think that we are a creep? So you can say that this is inherently a very logical and a very natural sense of, or things rather, that we fear. And for sex, well, sex is straightforward, right? Would I want to sleep with this person? If I do not want to sleep with this person, then the idea is that this thing is a non-event to me. And then hunger and lust, you can say that this goes towards our desire to a certain extent, right? So you can say that there are certain circumstances or animals that doesn't trigger any of this. So such as like a small little rabbit, it's not like we want the rabbit will threaten our survival. It's not like we want to procreate with the rabbit, but we still give certain attention to the rabbit, right? So if let's say we chance upon a wild rabbit, I'm not sure where in the world that you're going to be able to see wild rabbits, but just if you were to chance upon a wild, cute animal, it will instantly grab your attention. You'll be like, wow, you're focusing on that. Why are you focusing on that? To me, I see it as it's the same way predators look at prey. And you can say that the reason why predators look at prey is not so much that we want to kill them, right? Why did I say predators when they look at prey, and why do I say we, right? It seems very weird and odd that I actually instinctively use we, but generally predators, when they look at prey, it's not that they want to focus on killing the prey. You can say that the reason why predators look at prey is that they are looking in terms of sustenance, right? Is that I'm eating this to a certain extent. So the same attention that we give to cute little rabbits, I would see it as not so much of procreation, it's more of hunger and lust. So therefore desire. And you can say that when we are looking at somebody and we focus on somebody that we find attractive, it's a little bit of a debate whether or not it's touching on procreation or sustenance. But the idea is that it's not so much, you don't have to worry so much of is this sustenance or procreation, unless you really think about all these things and you really want to separate and try to have clarity of what something actually is. If you're just using in the terms of, okay, I just want to use this in attraction, all you need to know is that if you don't trigger all of this, is equivalent to a non-event. And you can say that this reptilian brain, the idea of us focusing on these three things, is also touching upon the idea of tension. So what is tension? Tension is basically when an animal and a human can be replaced by an animal in this sense, or interchangeable for animal in this sense, and it's the idea of attention, right? Attention is equivalent to tension. So if let's say right now I don't use another human being, I use the idea of you're camping in the wild. So you're having a good time, you're camping in the wild, this is your nice little tent, and for some reason when you're camping, maybe like these marshmallows, you're warming it by fire, and when you're camping, suddenly a bear comes along and wanders into your camp. And ideally what you see is not going to be this cute bear, right? Because bears are angry and dangerous by nature. They have sharp claws and they have sharp teeth, and they can probably kill us, a human being, a lone human being, if we want to. And you can say that if the bear is just chancing upon, right? So if let's say this is a top-down view of our camp, this is me, this is my tent, and then this is my fire, and this is the bear, and the bear is just going towards the direction and is paying me no heed, you can say that I would feel a little bit more relief. Most likely, I would still focus on the bear. The reason being is that the bear could potentially kill me, right? I can't take the bear as a non-event. And to a certain extent, you can say that what I'm touching upon is actually power, right? Because this is actually how power actually works. If you feel like I don't need to pay attention to you and the person that I'm dealing with is a non-threat, then the idea is that, well, you would be, in this situation, you would be the bear because you don't have to pay attention to the other person have to pay attention to you. But of course, I'm not touching in terms of power because like I said, if I share everything in terms of emotions and feelings, then I'm oversharing, right? I'm not telling you all the things that you need for attraction. I'm actually sharing and deviating on the topic. So the idea is that in this situation, if the bear doesn't pay you any heed, then you can say that, like, you know, well, there is no tension. But everything changes if now this is not the situation and this is the situation, right? The bear is now staring at us. And the bear is staring at us and I'm staring at the bear. Then if I'm in the situation, I'm the camper situation, then probably I'll wet my pants, right? Because how do I know what this bear potentially wants? This bear could come over and hug me, kill me, and whatsoever, and all the possibilities, right? And many of which is going to be undesirable. And you can say that the attention that we have with this bear is, in some sense, creating tension. And what do human beings or animals in general do in terms of tension? Then I'm pretty sure everybody have heard of the thing before, right? This is your fight, flight, and your freeze. Right? It's either when faced with a threat, we fight the threat, we run from the threat, or we freeze. Again, the idea is that this is only if we feel and there's a certain tension telling us that, okay, there's potentially something worrisome about this interaction, right? And going back to what I shared about the survival, you can say that being rejected, potentially if you fear rejection from a person, this you will find yourself when you're in the presence of somebody that you find attractive. For some reason, you just can't seem to function properly. And the reason why I think that people cannot function properly when they are in the presence of people that they are attracted to is because they are nervous. But what actually, if you think in terms of nervousness, basically nervousness is, well, you fear that something is going to go wrong. And you can say that the reason why your conscious decision making is being compromised is because, well, your body is trying to send you signals that you're in danger, right? You know, oh, this person is in danger. And how is that pretty girl that you are talking to equivalent to danger because of rejection? And again, you can say that the reason why I even need to share in terms of tension is that, in my opinion, if the two person doesn't mutually feel certain tension in the presence of each other, however minute, you can say that if I like somebody extremely much, then there's going to be a lot of tension, right? Because you can say that in terms of what I'm going to do is that I can't stop myself staring at the other person. Maybe because it triggers the sustenance part of my reptilian brain, right? I'm seeing in terms of, like, you know, my desires for this person. I really want to, in lack of better words, predate on this person. And if the person doesn't feel the same way back, then you can say that, well, there's no tension. Because if the person see me as a non-event, they see me as a chair, like I have so much desire for them, but they don't pay me no heed, then you can say that, like, okay, how are you going to be able to reconcile that? And the whole idea is that if you're treated as a non-event, there is likely not going to be any sort of tension. Then you can say that the reason why I share tension is because, well, now that you know that, well, in the situation you have tension, but if it's just two persons staring at each other, then it's going to be very weird, right? So if let's say it's a staring contest, somebody look at you this way and you look at this person this way, it's going to be very weird and creepy. Reason being is that you don't know what the other person is going to potentially do. So in a situation when there is tension, what I'm trying to get at, right, is a very long and convoluted way to say that you have to smile, because smiling is a way to recontextualize the tension as a friendly interaction. So although there is tension, right, you notice that I'm staring at this person for way too long, and then if I were to smile, then the idea is that, like, well, I'm staring at you because I'm not a threat. And by the way, this is just some fun little trivia. There is something that I read very, very long time ago, that it's the idea that if two person were to stare at each other longer than 4 seconds, two things happens. One is that you either want to sleep with them or you want to kill them. So take that trivial as however you want, right? And see it as however it is. But in any case, this is the idea, right? This is the idea of tension, etc. And again, we are going to the idea of non-event. So that's basically what I want to share in terms of the reptilian brain. So now we're going to actually move in terms of emotion. So emotion, you can say that it's the idea of the most important thing that I want you to know and take away when it comes down to emotion in general, is that you cannot have any sort of attraction, okay, without no attraction. There is no emotion, there's no attraction, sorry. And it's the idea of, if you want to attract somebody, if you do not trigger any sort of emotion, it is almost impossible for you to attract them. And the way that I see how these two things actually connects with each other is a bit of a chicken or the egg situation, right? You can say that the reptilian brain is only concerned about the first impression, and emotion is about long term. And you can say that, well, if first impression is that I don't see you as a non-event, I'm not even going to interact with you anyway, right? But even if we assume that despite the fact that I see you as a non-event, I at the very least see you as, okay, sort of a human being, and then I have to be polite to you because we either go to school together, we see each other, we are colleagues, etc., right? You're part of my life, be it I want to or not part of my private life, but my professional life maybe. But it's the idea of the maybe to a certain extent, even if the person is a non-event, you can still talk to the person, and potentially, so long as you use the idea of emotion properly, you might potentially still change the perception of this person at some point. So again, this is the thought that I sort of debate internally by myself, right? Is that, okay, can you attract somebody that can you attract the person if the person have already deemed you to be a non-event? That's basically my own internal debate, right? But the whole idea is that regardless of my internal debate, the whole thing that I have to share is the idea of the emotion, is that if there's no emotion, there's no attraction. So the idea is this, right? Ideally, if I want to attract somebody and I know that I want to trigger emotion in order to attract them, and maybe one of the things that I want to just quickly touch upon is that when we go back to the idea of reframing is always trying to put an explanation on the emotion, right? So you can say that if there is no emotion to actually reframe the whole thing, then, well, maybe the whole idea is that you can't reframe anything without any sort of emotion anyway, because reframing is the idea of how do you actually feel about this, and giving, like, maybe you're not angry, what you actually feel is love. So if, let's say, there's no emotion, you can't really differentiate the two things if you're too robotic. Maybe that's the reason why the whole idea of there is no emotion, there is no attraction. But going back to the idea of no emotion, no attraction, ideally, if you want to attract somebody, positive emotion is going to work the best. And what are some positive emotion that you can think in terms of the human being having, right? Joy is the most straightforward. Joy, happiness. In general, how do we trigger joy in another person? What action can we take to trigger joy? You can say that, well, we can make them laugh. And the ability to make the person laugh is actually translated to humor. Humor and being funny. To a certain extent, you can say that humor and being funny is one of the traits that people find to be most desirable in our partners. Be it girl, looking for guy looking for girl, or any other, right? But generally, the whole idea is that, well, human being, we want our significant other to be humorous, to be funny, and the reason why is that, well, being funny triggers the emotion of joy. Now, here's the thing that the most people do not expect. Keep in mind, I didn't put it in a way of there is no positive emotion, there is no attraction. I put it in a way of no emotion, no attraction, which means to say that, in some sense, if you want to attract somebody, you can also potentially trigger negative emotions. But the caveat that I have to give is that the negative emotions cannot fall under certain negative emotions by nature of how those negative emotions actually work. So one of the emotion that you can trigger when it comes to attraction is anger. So what do you mean? If I make the girl angry, I tell the wrong joke that I offend her, and then etc. It means that she's gonna like me potentially. Cause reason being is that if she feels anger about you and she constantly think about you, even if she thinks in terms of like this person is an asshole, you can potentially still reframe it in the future, right? You can potentially try to find a certain way to change her mind or make some certain suggestions that causes her to reframe it as, maybe I'm not thinking about this person because I'm angry. The reason why I'm thinking about them so much is because I like them. And I'm pretty sure that this have happened in the past. Even if this have never happened in the past, which I highly doubt so, this in some sense have happened in dramas or fictions before, right? And you can say that the reason why, again, when we watch fictions, it's not complete nonsense to us is because we feel like whatever is happening on the screen is relatable to a certain extent. So the idea is that with anger, you can potentially still attract the girl. And one of the way that you can think about negative emotion, using negative emotion to attract somebody, right? It's the idea of the nice guy, bad boy. Nice guys and bad boys. And the whole idea is that although I understand these two concepts, I very seldom like to use these two categories to actually try to categorize and explain things. Reason being is that most of the time when people bring up the idea of nice guys and bad boys is because they see themselves as one of them, right? If you see yourself as nice guys, the guy that treat women well in general and is respectful to them, etc., right? Then what you tend to see bad boys as like, they are the menace of society, and then they treat women in general so badly, and then like, they are so evil, and vice versa, right? Bad boy is gonna see the nice guys as well. They are boring, and then they are not even brave enough to go up to talk to the girl. So you can say that there's a lot of demonization between these two particular groups of people, right? But the whole idea, the reason that I bring up this nice guy, bad boy, is that because you can see in terms of bad boys in general, they sometimes utilize something called emotional roller coaster. So for when I bring up that term, maybe it will give PTSD to some of you who have experienced this in the past, and I'm very sorry if let's say that's the case, right? You have experienced that in the past. But the whole idea is that some days that I treat you well, and then some days I mistreat you and I ignore you. Maybe I don't really mistreat you, but the whole idea is that like, I don't really pay that much attention to you. And then like, the following day I pay all the attention to you, then I apologize to you. Oh, I'm so sorry because of this, because of that. I really like you. And then like the next day I don't pay attention to you. And what I'm basically doing, it comes down to the idea of no emotion, no attraction, right? And what I'm basically doing is that I'm bringing you to different sort of emotion, right? Joy and relief. Then anger and frustration, joy, relief, anger and frustration, and this fluctuation causes the person to continue to stay in love. Although it's quite painful for the person going through the emotional roller coaster, but the whole idea is that this keeps the person strung along, in terms of fishing, right? So you can say that, well, this is one example of how I can show you that negative emotions can actually affect attraction. So what are some of the emotions that you must avoid triggering in the other person? And even if you were to trigger these emotions, it's not a good thing in particular, right? So the negative emotions that you do not want to trigger is one of them being disgust. disgust. And the reason why triggering disgust is, in my opinion, quite unsavable, and it's quite difficult for you to even reframe, because the idea of disgust is that I associate you to be equivalent to be garbage. To be garbage and other disgusting things such as like, vomit and crap and everything like this, right? And the idea is that unless you are able to find a reason of why somebody would want to hug, kiss, and be anywhere near to garbage in general, then you can say that if somebody true feelings to you is disgust, then the whole idea, my suggestion is just find somebody else that's going to treat you well. Because if we feel disgust towards a person in general, what we basically do is that we see them as a subhuman. And you can say that, okay, well, if the person really does see me as like disgust, they feel a certain disgust towards me, most of the time it's because of morality. They see certain traits in me that they don't desire, such as the thing that I explained, right? If I put girls in general in terms of the emotional roller coaster, then you can say that, well, there are going to be some girls that see it's like, wow, this guy is disgusting, man. The behavior is no morals and everything like this. But hypothetically, if in the future I were to show signs that in actual fact, that's not the case, I am in actual fact, the reason why this case is because during this relationship this thing happened, and then like it's not so much of my fault. But of course you don't push the blame to the girl. You basically reframe it as like, there's I'm at fault, but because the circumstances is at that, and I learned my lesson, and now moving forward I'm gonna treat girls in general better. Then you can say that, okay, that's maybe one way that I can think in terms of like reframing disgust. So I know that I'm not putting up a very good argument by saying that like triggering disgust is worse than not triggering any sort of emotion, because in that example you can say that, well, you just give me one example that you can reframe disgust. But in general, like, trigger anger is so much easier for you to reframe compared to emotion like disgust, right? But maybe this recent thought that I have just changed my mind on the opinion of, okay, maybe disgust is not that bad. But one of the other killer emotion that you must never trigger is the emotion of boredom. And boredom is actually kind of a weird emotion in that sense. You can say that boredom can be described to be no emotion. Alright, just like boredom is the equivalent of zeros for numbers, the idea of boredom is that, okay, there should be certain emotion, but it is not there. And the funny thing about boredom is that I think that there was a study being done. They put people in general, right? So what they do is that they have this button, and when they push this button, it creates an electrical shock to a person. And of course, they don't really kill the person, but the electrical shock is quite unpleasant. And when they ask the participants of the test, would you like to be shocked again? Many of them said that I would actually pay money not to be shocked again. So interestingly enough, what they do is that they put the test participants into a empty room with no form of stimulation. So you're not allowed to have your phone, it's just four walls, no painting, no nothing. It's just you and your thoughts and this button on the table. And the funny thing that they found is that when they put people in the room for 15 minutes, there is a good number of people who, although they have been shocked in the past and they have said that I will pay money not to be shocked again, they actually would go ahead and press the button. Because in some sense you can say that to a human being bored is worse than being shocked, and the pain that associated from being shocked. So this is actually kind of like interesting, right? You should actually bring question into your mind of like, wow, actually is this actually how human beings works? So in any case of like, we can discuss whether or not and what's the reason that this thing goes on, etc. But this is not the idea of this video, right? The idea is that I just share information in terms of attraction and how you can use emotion to sort of attract the person, and what kind of pitfall you can avoid. And it goes back to the idea of boredom, right? So now that we know that boredom is so difficult and it's such a problematic emotion, and you can say that, well, it's not really an emotion because it's a lack of emotion, lack of stimulus, it comes back to the idea of the nice guy versus bad boys. Nice guys and bad boys. And I'm not sure if I'm intruding on the topic that I want to share on the information that I want to share in terms of the future, but I feel like, okay, this is actually a good time for me to share this. the idea of nice guys, right, and the whole idea of like why nice guys struggle so much to talk to girls, you can say that the whole principle is that I treat girls so well. And treating girls well is translated to I am nice to her, I'm nice to her, I say hello to her, and I smile at her, I ask about her, and etc., right? And all of this are quite noble, and they are quite good. But at the same time, they are boring. Why is it that they are boring? It's because although you are doing all these potentially nice things for the girl, guess who is also doing all these things for the girl? Practically everybody in the world, right? The auntie and uncle that she buys food, you know, if let's say she go to a restaurant and she buys food, the auntie and uncle is going to treat her the same way that you treat her. Her grandmother is going to treat her the same way that you're treating her. And practically anybody, any random strangers, is going to treat her the same way that you treat her. So what makes you so special? Essentially, you can say that that logic of me being nice to her should translate to her being in a relationship to me doesn't inherently make sense, because what you are is basic, right? You are doing exactly the same thing that other people is doing. So the whole idea is that again, it goes back to the idea of you have to trigger emotion. You have to trigger emotion if you want to attract somebody. And this is what, at the very least, bad boys does, right? You know, is that although they give negative emotion, then, you know, it's at least better than no emotion, right? Because again, if you don't trigger any sort of emotion, the person is bored, the person will very much likely want to shock themselves instead of being with you. And if they can't stand being with you in general, then how are they going to be in a relationship with you, right? So with that being said, then maybe the follow-up question is, okay, now that I know that I need to trigger emotion, and how do I actually trigger emotion? Then you can say that, well, there's a lot of different ways. One way that I can't teach you how to be funny, or at least I can't teach you how to be funny in a very short period of time. I'm not even sure if I have enough content to actually think in terms of how do I actually help someone to be funny. But the best way, in my opinion, and the way that I generally utilize to trigger emotion in the other person, be it positive, negative, doesn't matter, and the most fail-safe, the most idiot-proof is always going back to the thing that I constantly share about, which is your mirroring and your sense of importance. And you can say that, yeah, to a certain extent, it also requires you to have the 3 magic question. And the principle or the idea behind it is that when I am using this framework of talking to the person, generally what I'm going more into details is what is the things that they desire. And if they desire certain things, they will talk about them with more passion. If they talk about historical events, something that happened to them in the past, or like some memories that they have, if it's negative in general, I give the emotional response of I feel very, very sorry for you. But the idea is that when they think in terms of positive emotion, so something interesting that happened to them, something exciting that happens to them, they have to bring their emotional and mental state back to when that event happened. And when they talk about that event, you can say that all those emotions that they felt about when the event happened to them initially is being brought up in the interaction with you. So there is the idea of association. And you can say one of the ways that human being we utilize emotion is to associate them with events. When those emotion is being brought up during the interaction with you, the positive emotions are usually associated with you. And you can say that if we were to think back in terms of after we've been on a date with a person or after an interaction, we don't generally remember everything that the person said, but we generally remember how the person made us feel. And you can say that if throughout the interaction, all I'm doing is that I'm having the best time of my life, getting the best possible emotional conversation that I have, because this person is utilizing mirroring, sense of importance, and 3 magic question to get me to talk about the things that I enjoy and the things that matters to me, how would this person feel after the interaction? All the good feelings will be associated with you. So I find it the best possible way, if you really do want to attract somebody, is just start mastering your mirroring, sense of importance, and 3 magic question. Because if you are able to talk to the person and give them the best possible conversation in the world, and you can say that the reason why it's the best conversation is because it's emotional in nature, then it's a kind of a idiot-proof way for you to actually garner attraction, right? But of course, if let's say you say that, well, Elong, I'm a person who I want to create my own destiny, I don't want to use any sort of framework, I want to be genuine, then the whole idea is that I urge you to go towards the idea of, well, you have to do certain things that trigger emotion. So the way that I see it is that if let's say you have to tell a cringe joke, right? In your head is that, okay, I got a cringe joke that I feel like I want to tell. Or rather, you will say that, okay, I have a funny joke that I want to tell. But there's a chance that the girl is going to interpret this as a cringe. Do I take the risk and tell this cringe joke? Then you ask different people. Some people will say that, like, dude, don't risk the thing, right? She might get the wrong impression of you. The way that I see it is that I would much rather you risk it by telling that joke that potentially could be cringe. Reason being is that if she laughs, it triggers emotion. If you don't tell the joke and all the while you play safe by just talking to her naturally and talk about the weather, and all the things that she don't care about, you don't trigger any sort of emotion, it's next to impossible for you to actually attract them. So in any case, this is just like the emotion itself, right? And the last thing that I do want to touch in terms of just emotion, and of course there's also another part that I want to share about in terms of valuation, is that for the last thing that you might potentially want to know about emotion is that there are certain emotions that are action emotions. There are emotions that inspires the human animal to actually take action, and one of which is actually anger. Joy to a certain extent, right? But the easiest way for me to remember all of these things, and you can say that the 2 things that I focus on, is the idea of fear and desire. And if you're very sensitive in terms of picking up emotion, if you can pick up the emotion of fear or the emotion of desire, it's actually very easy for you to sort of reframe things in general, right? And the example that I used previously is the idea of the insurance things, right? You're not paying, and you can say that paying to a certain extent feels like it's a pain because it's losing resources. You're not paying for insurance plan. What you're doing is that you're saving for the future. So what I'm basically doing is that I'm reframing this to be something that you desire. And if you are able to reframe things in a way of fear and desire, and I know that I'm touching and go on this part, and maybe in the future I'm going to share more when I touch in terms of emotions in general, then potentially you can say that if you are able to control fear and desire, then you probably have no problem utilizing emotion when it comes to attraction. And by extension, you probably don't really need help when it comes to attraction, right? You probably is somebody who is quite good at attraction in general. So the last thing before I close, and I know that I'm stretching in terms of 30 minutes already, so it turns out that I do have a good amount of content for this, for better or for worse. But the idea is valuation. Okay, the valuation is the last thing that I want to touch upon, and valuation will actually, in some sense, creep towards the next part of the video that I do want to share, right? Which is the final part of the video. Hopefully, the final part of the video is the idea of the mindset that we have that screws up attraction. So when people struggle with attraction, there are certain mindsets that they have that is actually getting in their own way, and one of which it actually comes down to its valuation does affect this to a certain extent. And what do I mean in terms of valuation? And you can say that valuation, what I'm basically doing is that I'm breaching the idea of emotion, right? Valuation comes back to framing. Okay, it comes back to the idea of when we look at somebody, we are able to put an arbitrary score of their attractiveness in based on our head, right? We are able to look at them and then we are able to determine to a certain extent, okay, they are this amount of attractive, and this amount of attractive is basically my opinion. So other people may find them more attractive, other people will find them less attractive, but at least when I look at this person is a 1,500, this person is a 8 out of 10, yada yada. But of course, the idea is that if the person were to see us as attractive, then we don't really have an issue. But what if this person doesn't see us to be attractive? This person sees us as a 500. Then you can say that this is a problem of valuation, right? Because valuation is how we determine arbitrary value for something. using feelings and emotion, because of course there is quantifiable way for us to evaluate somebody by saying that, okay, this person is this amount of objectively attractive, but for the most part, even that sense, we need to use emotion. And the principle that I like to share in terms of, or the principle that I like to apply is called the duck principle, right? If it looks like a duck, well, duck principle, I don't want to type out the entire thing, but the idea is that if it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, and it walks like a duck, then likelihood is a duck, right? Yes, there's a chance that it's a platypus, but you might as well just deal with it as if there is a duck. And how does this go into attraction? This goes into the very animalistic idea of prey and predator. So if two wild animals just encountered each other for the very first time in the wild, so like, you know, maybe this, and they are unable to determine who is the prey and who is the predator, because again, there's no context, the first person that acts like a prey or predator is going to tell the other person what this context actually is. So for example, if one of them turn tails and run, then this one knows that, okay, it means that I'm a predator, right? Which is why if you run away from an animal, the animal will have an instinctive drive to actually chase and pursue you, because this goes into our animal brain, right? The idea of prey and predator, and how it actually comes down to attraction is the idea of the attention that we give to the other person. So if you were to give an overwhelming amount of attention that, wow, I like you so much, you know, please be with me, you know, I can't live without you and everything like this, what you're basically telling the other person is that, well, your attention is worth nothing. It's the same thing when it comes down to buying something, right? If you have a choice of buying any shirt in the world, and you have your own choice, right? And you can choose any shirt that you want. But if I deliberately come up to you and I put this shirt in your face and I say, hey, buy this, please buy this. Hey, very, very cheap. You know, just buy this right now. You know, don't look at other things. You know, what is the instinctive feeling that you get, right? When people try to hard sell you something, most of the time you find that whatever they're hard selling is not worth anything, because if you need to hard sell the thing, probably there's no value in the item, because you can say that, well, you have to push a garbage on me, therefore you are hard selling me, and if you don't hard sell me, then I will make an informed decision, and if your item is good, I may potentially buy your item. So the whole idea is that this works the same for attraction, right? If you give overwhelming attention to the person and the person doesn't respect you in any sort of way, then you can say that, well, in this situation, you know, although the relationship is not prey-predator, but you can say that, well, maybe to a certain extent it's sort of like that, because you're a predator, you're trying to go after the person, right? But the other person is just constantly running away. So the fact of you pursuing the person would cause the person to eventually run away out of instincts, because it's so imbued in us in prey and predator. So how do I avoid all of these things? When it comes down to attraction, all you need to understand is that you do not have to push any sort of attraction. Do you have to put in effort to actually chase the person? Yes. You have to sort of be polite in a conversation. You have to talk to them. You have to do the basic thing. I was like, hey, hi, how nice to meet you. And you have to talk to the person. But the important thing is that you cannot beg for the relationship. You cannot be the person that, like, I like you so much, please go out with me and everything like that, which one of the mindset that generally would screw up somebody's attraction process. Essentially, if you have that mindset, I'm sorry to say that it's going to be very difficult for you to actually attract anybody unless you were to change that mindset. And I'll touch on more on this on the next video, right? Because I can't potentially share everything here. But the whole idea is that, you know, one of the way, and you can say that this way is a little bit more manipulative, and when it comes down to using manipulative when it comes to attraction, my view of it is that, what's the point? If I'm able to trick you into being in love with me for one day, I have to spend so much, the potentially like a lifetime with you. And do I want to trick you for my entire life? Is it worth it? Is that actually love? Then it's a whole debate. It's a philosophical debate, right? When it comes down to the morality of this. My view on this is that, although I know all these techniques of manipulation, if I truly genuinely want to bond with the person, there's no point that I use all of this. I use all of this if I want to get a certain results. Like, for example, if let's say I need to do certain negotiations, right? And my well-being and my interest is is weighed against the other person's interest, then you can say that, well, I would probably want to tip the scale on in my favor. But when it comes down to attraction, is that you two ideally should work together in a relationship. It's not a situation of me versus her or her versus me. It's the idea of what we are basically trying to do is that, okay, can we actually work together in a relationship? If we can't work together cooperatively, then I think it's best that we go our separate ways. And I think that if you actually have this type of mindset, it helps you escape the prey predator mindset, because the prey predator mindset is me versus the prey. It's one runs and one chases and kill. It's not a situation of two person cooperatively working together. So maybe you can say that that's already one mindset that can take. But the whole idea is that, going back to what I'm about to share when it comes down to things that is manipulative, is that one of the ways that you can actually manipulate somebody to get and to fall for you is to shower them with attention, paying attention. Oh, how are you? Good morning. Essentially, you are basically simping for them, right? And next thing you know, pull all the attraction back. Basically, give no attention whatsoever. Don't basically, if you were to go on the one example, I would say that if you were to text them every single day for a month, and of course they don't value your attention, so they can give very short texts, then all you do is that after that 1 month, just break everything off. No text, no nothing. When you talk to them, just be polite. You don't need to simp for them, and then just basically start paying attention to somebody else. Of course, we are going in terms of like manipulation, right? But the whole idea is that if you give attention and then you suddenly take away the attention, it's equivalent to the idea of like, oh, please buy my shirt, and the person say, I don't want to buy your shirt. They say, oh, you don't want to buy my shirt? Well, this is a limited offer, so since you don't want to buy this, the offer have expired, so like, then you wouldn't be able to buy the shirt anyway, and then you leave, right? You don't try to fight them and convince them that this is a limited offer. You leave, and then they'll probably think in terms of like, hey, maybe I should have bought that shirt, because like now, even if I wanted to buy the shirt, I would have no situation or no chance to buy this. So it's the idea of scarcity, and you can say that this is a strategy that people use to sell things in the real world. And guess what? Because it touches on the idea of the human animal and the human emotion, this also works on the principle of attraction in general. So in any case, I shared for 47 minutes. I didn't intend to share for 47 minutes. I don't even think that I was able to share for 15 minutes. But again, I shared about a lot of different things, and hopefully it's not too convoluted. Because when I share in terms of emotion and feelings, there's so many things in terms of emotion and feelings, right? That I feel like if I were to share them partially, then I can't, maybe it's not as easy and applicable for people to wrap their brain around. So in any case, this is where I'm going to end off when it comes down to the part when it comes to emotion in attraction. The next part, what I'm going to touch on is going to be the mindset that people have that actually screws up their attraction process. And like what I mentioned, the idea of validation is already in some sense bridging towards that, right? One of the mindset I say that if you keep giving attention to the person, then the person doesn't value your attention, then it's the idea of people hard selling you, right? That obviously it would screw up your attraction process if you were to overwhelmingly shower the person in attention. But the important thing is that there's always a silver lining, right? Just because overshowering is an issue, it doesn't mean that, well, then I don't pay attention to the person. Then you can say that if you don't pay attention to the person, you basically tell the person that the person to you is a non-event. And if they find you to also be a non-event, then both of you will go your separate way, right? So the whole idea of like, does playing hard to get actually works is maybe something that I'll touch upon in the next video if I remember. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed this. If there's any sort of confusion that you want to clarify, then do let me know your thoughts in this, and then I'll do my best to clarify all of this. But in any case, then I'm going to see you in the next one. Alright, see you.